Once upon a time, there was a funny character named Bunny. She was a rather shy and formal individual, so everyone, of course, called her Mrs. Bunny. She ruled over her little kingdom as a benign tyrant and was loved and feared by her hairy subjects. Mrs. Bunny, Her Majesty, if you have 4 legs, had many curious and whimsical events that in her kingdom could be called adventures. This all happened in a quaint little corner of the world that few people even know about, called Colorville. And these little adventures may seem mundane, but certainly not to Mrs. Bunny and those that she ruled. Chapter 1. One day, without any warning, Mrs. Bunny arrived. No one expected it because this little kingdom didn't even have a cabbage patch. There were a lot of rumors, but most of the residents of Colorville just assumed she hatched from an Easter egg. Once she came along, a cabbage patch couldn't even be grown because cabbage was a yummy delicacy to her, and the workers in Colorville that planted the crops finally gave up planting cabbage. This was because Mrs. Bunny secretly kept munching the new little sprouts right down to the ground. They had more luck with kale, because I guess it grew fast enough to keep ahead of her munching. From then on, all babies came from the kale patch. No one minded. It was a small detail that could be easily overlooked. When she first arrived, she was very small, with the cutest little pink nose. The residents of Colorville were quite intrigued by this lovely, tiny princess. It is safe to say they had never seen anyone quite like her before. They were a rather crude bunch, and who knows what was going through their heads. They were most likely wondering if they could eat her. They soon learned she would not be putting up with shenanigans like this, and the most they could do was snuff and sniff her. No one realized that this was their future queen, so they didn't even call her Princess Bunny. But at least they no longer called her lunch. And that concludes Chapter 1 of the Mrs. Bunny's Adventures. Don't forget to come back to see Chapter 2. Chapter 2. Mrs. Bunny grew very quickly, and not just in size. She grew in stature, and her confidence blossomed like there was no tomorrow. She soon began viewing herself as the queen of the realm, and her subjects quickly learned to call her Your Majesty and to kowtow to her. Long gone were the days that those brutish individuals wondered, in their heart of hearts, exactly how she tasted, and if she would even be enough to make a snack, let alone a meal. They recognized her dominance, and most even felt pride that their little principality had such a splendid ruler. They looked forward every day to her pithy jokes and words of wisdom that she spewed forth like an unlimited stream of regurgitated grass. She was queenly in every way, and Colorville's economy and beauty only became more brilliant. Mrs. Bunny, however, was a little bored. She knew she was made for greater things, so she decided to have a series of adventures. She wanted to have majestic adventures, so she could write a book and put it on YouTube and hope for viral magnification. Her subjects loosely observed her behavior, and frankly, it made no sense whatsoever to them. As previously described, they were a loutish lot, poorly educated and mostly wondering when their next meal would be. They spoke amongst themselves about her queenly behavior as a personal quirk. They also had trouble even understanding each other. Some of them were even almost illiterate. When she determined that this was true, she vowed to herself that one of the adventures she would take on would be to teach them all to read and to speak proper grammatical phrases. Like many new rulers, she was optimistic and overestimated her own abilities and underestimated the stupidity of her subjects. But this is all to be explained in future chapters. This is the end of chapter 2. Please come back for chapter 3. Chapter 3, Adventure Number 1. Mrs. Bunny set off to find her first adventure. Right away after she left, the subjects took immediate advantage of her absence. They had one party after another. Oh, what fun! They depleted their stored up food. They had so much rich food not usually allowed, such as radishes and mangoes and beer. They started to feel very, very sick. They missed Mrs. Bunny and were bickering and getting mad at each other. Meanwhile, Mrs. Bunny was off in search of her first adventure. She looked high and low, and finally, she halted in her tracks. What was that yummy, citrusy smell? She looked all around and thought she must be imagining this, until she finally looked straight up. Wow! Blood oranges and enough to feed her loyal subjects for at least a couple of months. How could she possibly get them down? She thought and thought and thought, and finally got tired and laid down, and still kept thinking. She kept thinking and then got kind of mad and thumped her back legs. Wow! A few oranges fell down. So she then thumped her back legs really hard. Yikes! Millions of oranges rained down upon her. Mrs. Bunny, you hit the jackpot. There were so many oranges she almost couldn't even carry them all back to her kingdom. Somehow she managed to carry them all back. Her subjects were so glad to see her, especially because they had eaten all the food in the realm. She wasn't mad, she just dosed them all with 5 tablespoons of Pepto-Bismol. The poop was pink for a week. Mrs. Bunny was so glad to be home, she treated herself to a banana that luckily she had hidden away before leaving on her first adventure. Woo! She ate the whole thing, then dosed herself with Pepto-Bismol. And that is the end of Mrs. Bunny's first adventure. I wonder what her next adventure will be. Are you wondering that? Come back for Chapter 4. This is Queen Mrs. Bunny's Adventures, Chapter 4, Adventure 2. Mrs. Bunny stayed home and ruled her kingdom for a while. Right when she was getting ready to seek out her second adventure came to her. A sprightly fairy named Nicolette hatched out of one of blood oranges that Mrs. Bunny had brought home from her previous quest. Nicolette was beautiful and very shy. However, she was a giant, and everyone, including the queen, was terrified to see her walking around. However, once everyone got used to her and her magical horse, it became very fun to have her in their kingdom. Colorville used to be beautiful, but now it was even more vivid as Nicolette made everything bloom. She didn't even try to do this, it seemed to just happen. Wow! Mrs. Bunny quickly decided that her next adventure would be to learn how to do this wonderful thing. She tried and tried until she was exhausted and disgruntled. She blinked her eyes like Nicolette seemed to do, but nothing happened. All of her attempts led to nothing at all. She started to fear that her loyal subjects might notice and switch their loyalty to Nicolette. However, her rule was so wise and whimsical, she needn't worry. Her people loved her beyond measure. Nicolette continued to beautify the place and to play winsome music on her flute and harp. One day, Mrs. Bunny had a brainstorm. It was the music making everything grow. She wasn't musical, so she had to be satisfied with her own abilities and make use of Nicolette's magical presence. From then on, the music flowed and the flowers bloomed, and all was well in Colorville. Mrs. Bunny was so relieved she ate an entire banana again. And that's the end of this chapter. Please come back for the next one. Chapter 5, Adventure 3. Mrs. Bunny started to think about her reign as queen and realized she needed somebody to take her place when she could no longer rule. She needed a son who would be the prince. First, she went to the magical oranges that were stored and tried to tell if any of them were about to hatch. She remembered the rumors that had occurred when she showed up. So she looked at all the Easter eggs she could find to see if any had a prince for her to hatch. She even sat on them for a while, but no luck. She asked Nicolette if she had any ideas, but her friend, so talented in other ways, didn't know either. When Mrs. Bunny asked her to sit on the Easter eggs, she refused. so they didn't even get a chance to see if that would work. In her searches, Mrs. Bunny came upon a magical doorway, but she decided she would wait for another adventure to explore that. Woo, was she getting tired. She decided to go home and eat lunch. She went home and ate some lettuce. It was delicious and revived her a little, but she was still pretty tired. Who else can I ask, she wondered. She got herself some yummy dessert, one of her very favorites. It was kale. She munched and chewed happily, but she had a vague sense that she was missing something. What could it be? What could it be? Did it have something to do with getting a son? She kept thinking and munching, and suddenly she thought, the kale patch! Quickly, Queen Mrs. Bunny scampered out to the kale patch to look for a son. Fondly, she thought about her own childhood and how everyone thought she was so cute. A little white angel, that's what I was, she thought to herself. She looked everywhere, not just in the kale section, but in the entire garden. She carefully examined under every single leaf and did not see a little white angel anywhere. Now what should I do, she wondered, but then she heard a shout. Your Majesty, Your Majesty, look what I found running out of the kale patch. It's your son. It was Winkle shouting, her trusted servant. She halted in her tracks. Wow, that's not what I envisioned, she thought. But she named the little rascal Charlie and took him home. Woo! Mrs. Bunny had a sneaking suspicion that her biggest adventure yet was still ahead of her. Boy, was she right. Raising Charlie would turn out to be the hardest adventure yet. But that's all for the next chapter. Good night, Charlie. Don't forget to come back for chapter 6 and more about Charlie and his mom, Mrs. Bunny. Chapter 6, Raising Charlie. Mrs. Bunny and the whole kingdom she reigned over quickly became quite attached to little Charlie. He was a little rascal and scampered all around exploring everything. Mrs. Bunny couldn't really keep up with him, but she tried. He was quick and very mischievous. Quite often she felt tired and took several naps each day. Charlie quickly learned that he could get in the most trouble and have the most fun if he tried things when Mom was asleep. He wasn't a bad boy, just very energetic. One day he played with his breakfast and made an oatmeal face. He liked it so much he absolutely refused to eat it. I can't eat Mr. Oatmeal Face, he sobbed. What do you think I am, a cannibal? Mrs. Bunny tried reasoning with him. She tried pleading with him. He just would not eat Mr. Oatmeal Face. So finally, she gave up and made him his favorite meal. It was a picnic lunch basket filled to the brim with yummy alfalfa. She loved it too, so they both enjoyed a little picnic together and had apples for dessert. Yum yum. They ate everything, even the apple cores. Such a fun day. Another time, they were playing hide and seek and he jumped into the shed, and she looked everywhere for him. She got worried and called his name. Charlie! He didn't hear her, and she was taking so long to find him, he finally fell asleep. She looked and started to become quite frantic, running around, flustered, making small sounds of distress. When she finally found him, boy, was he in trouble. She put him in timeout, and he really didn't think he deserved it. "Why do I have to be punished?" he yelled in his squeaky little voice. "It's not my fault you're a terrible seeker. I'm a good hider. That's the point of the game, isn't it?" She really couldn't argue with that. So she let him out of timeout and made him his favorite dinner, which was also her favorite dinner. Yum, yum, what a feast. And woo, what a day. Mrs. Bunny didn't know how much more of all this she could take. Charlie was growing very quickly. He grew and grew and grew. Mrs. Bunny thought to herself, "Well, he will be a teenager soon, and I really won't know what to do with him." He started eating more and trying to act independently. Charlie was almost as big as Mrs. Bunny, but he still wanted to cuddle Mom in between his bouts of naughty behavior. Not only did he grow, but his hair became long and shaggy, and no matter how much she pleaded, he wouldn't allow it to be cut. "You look like a ragamuffin," Mrs. Bunny yelled. He snottily answered, "Well, you look like a ragamuffin's mother. Just leave me alone. I don't tell you how to wear your hair." Charlie thumped off in an angry manner and wouldn't come down for dinner. Mrs. Bunny made some of Charlie's favorite food for supper, but he just refused to come out of his room. "Charlie," she called, "we're having cucumbers, squash, avocados, tomatoes, and blood oranges." "Leave me alone," he sobbed. So Mrs. Bunny ate it all herself. Then Mrs. Bunny felt bloated and disgruntled. When Charlie came out of his room, she was so glad that she took him out for ice cream cones and even let him have 2 scoops. He had watermelon sherbet and pink bubblegum. She had just 1 small scoop. When they got home from the ice cream place, Charlie flopped down sloppily on the floor. "Hey, Mom," he said, "can we order a pizza?" "Yes, okay," she said with a little resigned sigh. She loved him so much and knew his time with her was limited. So that's the story of raising Charlie. Mrs. Bunny knew there were so many adventures ahead, and she was pretty sure that Charlie wasn't going to ever be dull. Well, that's what you want in a ruler, she thought to herself. Good night, Charlie. And that is the end of Chapter 6, Raising Charlie. Please come back and see what happens next in Chapter 7. Chapter 7. Charlie Gets Sick. Everything was going smoothly in Colorville, and Mrs. Bunny was relieved because little Charlie, who was very big now, seemed to be calming down and not having teenager angst anymore. But then she noticed he wasn't doing much of anything. He seemed lethargic, even though he had plenty of sleep. He was not at all hungry, even when Mrs. Bunny made his favorite, delectable dishes. She became worried and spent a lot of time reading medical books to see if she could figure it out. She asked everyone she knew, and no one seemed to have a solution. She started to get more and more worried and knew she had to do something. Charlie was her son and she loved him dearly despite the trials and tribulations of raising him. She decided to consult the giantess oracle. She would have done it much sooner, but she was afraid of this large and wise sage. The giantess gave her some magic pebbles and extensive instructions. She was to go to the magical doorway, and the pebbles were to be placed on the sun symbols right in front. The pebbles worked as a key. Then she was to say a certain word, which I can't tell you because I'm afraid of the oracle too. Once she had gained entrance, she was to find a path to the source of the elixir of life and was to bring a small vial back for Charlie. She carefully memorized these important instructions. She felt that Charlie's life depended on it. Then she scampered off as fast as she could go. Once Mrs. Bunny went through the magical doorway, the very first thing she encountered was a large, frightening ogre that wanted to eat her. She took it as a sign that she shouldn't go that way, and she speedily avoided a horrible fate. Next, Mrs. Bunny came upon a lush and loaded blood orange tree. She took that as a sign that so far she was going the right way. She knew all about magical blood oranges, but didn't stop to try to get some. Her mission was crucial. She wouldn't stop for anything. Next, Mrs. Bunny came upon a funny troll who was singing a song in a hoarse, gravelly voice. She couldn't understand what the song was about, so at first she was stumped and wasn't sure if she should go that way. But then she saw the magic pebbles on the ground and knew she was on the right path. By this time, Mrs. Bunny was getting tired, but she didn't stop to rest and she didn't stop to eat supper. She saw up ahead a warm, splendorous glow, and she headed in that direction. I hope this is the right way, she thought to herself. The glowing area was so splendid, Mrs. Bunny decided it had to be the right way. She almost stopped to bask in the amazing warmth and stare at the sight. Then she realized that there was something ominous about her wish to stop. "It's a trick!" And she quickly changed direction. "Oh my," she exclaimed. "What is that? This has got to be it. Wow, happy!" She looked carefully all over to make sure there weren't any hidden dangers or pitfalls. She sniffed and walked all around the area so she could see if something else would reveal itself. She even tasted it, and it tasted sweet and bubbly and made her feel rejuvenated. "This is what I have been looking for," she said. Then she filled a small vial with the precious liquid. She scampered home, lickety-split, and when she saw Charlie, he looked even worse. "Charlie!" Mrs. Bunny gave the elixir to Charlie, and he immediately drank it down and perked right up. Yay! Charlie! Everyone was ecstatic. Charlie was okay. He was still a tiny bit tired, so he flopped right down. Mrs. Bunny kept a careful eye on him for the whole night. What a relief! Her son was okay. Woo! Good night, Charlie. And that is the end of chapter 7. Come back for chapter 8. Chapter 8. One day, Mrs. Bunny heard someone singing. I want a bone, I want a bone, I want a lot of bones. It was Snoopy, and it was lovely, and it gave her the great idea that she would have a talent show. And she would invite everyone to participate. She knew there was a lot of untapped talent in her kingdom. The first contestant was Nicolette, but her harp was so pretty that a giant from the next realm was conjured up and started singing along. It was lovely, but Nicolette couldn't claim that as her own, so she had to pick another activity. Mrs. Bunny was, of course, the judge, and what she said was law.
I'll be back. I want to get coffee for us. It's in the car. In reply, echoing Gloria in Chelsea's Dale. Gloria in Chelsea's Day.
Okay.
Great.
Next, Winkle, her funny servant, performed on the piano. Though Mrs. Bunny thought it was fabulous, she was going to be very strict and not play favorites if she could help it. She loved Winkle, so it might be that her judgment was a tiny, tiny bit biased. Chauncey wrote a little song and performed it. He is such a little character. Do you think he will win? Listen and decide. I think it's way too early to judge yet. Next, lovely Snoopy performed a song. What a lovely singing voice you have, Snoopy. She is the one that got the whole thing going when Mrs. Bunny heard her singing for her supper. When Snoopy was done singing, she asked Mrs. Bunny if it was allowable to have another act if it was with other people as a group. Mrs. Bunny said she would let her know. Nicolette performed again, but this time she played her flute and hoped no giants were listening. Next, Nicolette's younger cousin, Guinevere, asked if she could participate. She was visiting for the summer. She wanted to display the gorgeous flower arrangements she had made. Wow! So pretty. After getting permission to perform again, Snoopy got together with her three best buddies. They were going to perform a barbershop quartet. Lucy said that she would only participate if she could still have a turn by herself. Don't worry, Lucy. Next, Grendolly tried to sing, but it didn't really work very well. Probably she hadn't prepared at all. Mrs. Bunny said that's okay, everyone gets to participate. No one is excluded. They all had a chuckle. What do you think? Lovely little Lily played a little song. She was so cute that everyone felt she had a chance because such a small individual can't be expected to play anything other than the simplest tune. Snoopy missed it because she fell asleep after performing twice.
Wait. Okay, now start.
Then Lily performed a graceful and winsome dance. Oh, how pretty! Before she could finish, the giant, who wasn't even invited to the show, made it start to hail, and they all ran inside to be safe. Yikes! There were still many, many talented individuals that wanted to perform, but everyone was so tired they decided to stop for lunch. And that is the end of chapter 8, but not the end of the talent show. Come back after lunch to see more talent, and that will be chapter 9. Chapter 9, More Talent Show. After lunch was over, the contestants took a nap, so there was no further talent show that day. However, the next morning, there were even more contestants lined up. How exciting! What a talented bunch! Mrs. Bunny was happy the subjects of her realm were having so much fun. A cute little sprout named CJ, short for Christopher Jabalabalon, was in the audience and had not been yesterday. He was Lily's little brother and he heard about how fun the whole thing was. He was all ready to clap. Nicolette's mom came to watch. She had never come to Colorville because she had to stay very close to the ocean or else she would age like crazy. She was 567 years old and looked less than 50. She came because a message sparrow told her about her talented daughter. Don't worry, she'll leave early. Lucy was the very first contestant. She bravely showed how she could float, and this was a big hit. When she finished, at least 4 toddlers had to be fished out of the water because they all wanted to turn to try floating. Wow! Next, a green-eyed vixen named Penny, short for Penelope di Dopo. Actually, just call her Penny. Everyone else does. She showed some graceful yoga poses. The audience all tried them too. It was fun! Janopoly, a reclusive writer, Jan for short, came and danced. Then Jan and Anthony danced together. This was a rare happening because Jan mostly sat around listening to music and writing his alternate reality novels. Mrs. Bunny called a brief intermission so everyone could have a quick snack. Woo! Watching shows was pretty hard work.
Shake it, Jan. Shake it, Jan. That was good, Jan.
Dance by your security around. Martha's a good dancer. Okay, let's
Go ahead, guys.
Here we go. Here, Jim, sit down.
You gotta keep moving, Mary.
Come on. I'm going to start without thorns, okay? The white flower. Next, Pollywollygog, Bully for short, don't ask me why, I don't know either, dug a deep hole. Lucy was so impressed she closely watched to try to memorize the technique used. Next, Lucky, Penny's best friend, sang a loud song. Most of the audience thought it was actually caterwauling, but what did they know? After all, Mrs. Bunny had said everyone can participate. No one is excluded. Meow! Next, Bully sang a haunting song. She was a soprano and everyone was surprised that she sang so well. Such a little individual, but I guess her chest and lungs are bigger than average.
You'll be free. You'll be listening to angels as you're cradled in the skies. I can almost feel you with me. I sing and close my eyes. I pray you will hear me as I sing my lullabies. I will sing in harmony with angels. Will sing to you all night. I know that you'll always be forever here with me. Though
Next, Christopher Jaime played the piano, and then he brought down the house by conducting an orchestra. Everyone thought he was so good they were sure he would win. But Mrs. Bunny said, "It's not over till it's over. Mrs. Bunny, you're so fair." Very nice. There were still so many that wanted to participate and show what they could do. Mrs. Bunny realized they could never finish today. "Okay, everyone," she said, "we are going to make this a weekly event. Everybody come back next Friday because now it's time for lunch." They all ate pizza. "Yummy, what a treat, yum." Then they all started planning their next talent display. That is the end of chapter 9. Please don't forget to come back next Friday for chapter 10 and hear all about Mrs. Bunny and her compatriots. Chapter 10. Mrs. Bunny becomes vegan. Mrs. Bunny was very interested in her health. She had a country to run after all, and she felt it was important to maintain her health so that she could be a good ruler for a long time. She exercised every day. Yay, Mrs. Bunny! She often read esoteric books because she liked to keep herself well informed on new health and nutrition standards. She was very well read and always eager to try new things. One day she read about the health benefits to being a vegan. Mrs. Bunny also liked to eat, and she didn't want to give up any of her first, second, or third favorite foods. I will ask Winkle to look up foods that I like and see how hard it is to keep to the recommended foods. I wonder how strict it is. Winkle, she said kindly, what about nasturtiums? Don't worry, Majesty, he said after he checked. You can still eat nasturtiums. Yay! Mrs. Bunny was so happy she went and overate at the nasturtium patch. Yum, yum, yum. What about giant squash or giant zucchini? Yes, those are okay too, but don't eat any right now. Let's wait until we are done checking. What about cauliflower, radishes, and carrots? She asked hopefully. Yes, Winkle said, those are fine. And how about bananas, blood oranges, and red peppers? Winkle checked, and sure enough, they were all okay. Are broccoli and bean sprouts okay? Mrs. Bunny secretly crossed her fingers until Winkle came back and shouted, Yes! Yes! After Winkle assured her that spinach and tomatoes were okay, she did a little jig. I can't become a vegan, she said, because I already am one. And that is the end of chapter 10. Please come back for chapter 11. Chapter 11. One day, Mrs. Bunny was looking around to see if she could get an inspiration for a new adventure. She realized that for the most part, her constituents would not be able to help her or accompany her on her adventures. However, they might come up with a good idea, and she could decide if she wanted to do it. She asked Charlie, but he had no good suggestions. Mrs. Bunny asked Winkle if he had any ideas. He said, why don't you make rice balls and put funny little surprises in them, give them to people and make them try to guess what's inside. Mrs. Bunny thought it was something she might try in the future. Winkle went back to sleep. Silly Winkle. She was about to go and find Nicolette, and then Lucy came running up. Can I be first in the talent show? I want to show how I can twirl a baton. At first, Mrs. Bunny was a little confused. Then Mrs. Bunny understood what Lucy was talking about. Lucy, she said gently, the talent contest isn't until tomorrow. It's Thursday today, and tomorrow is Friday. That's when the contest will be. But you can absolutely be first, okay? Lucy was happy. Then Mrs. Bunny asked Lily's odd older cousin. He seemed to have a lot of really good ideas. Unfortunately, Mrs. Bunny could not understand a word he was saying. Is it tomorrow yet? Asked Lucy very hopefully. No, Lucy, not until you go to sleep. Lucy immediately went to bed so tomorrow would come faster. Lucy, you are so silly. Good night, Lucy. I guess everyone wants tomorrow to come faster. Good night, Mrs. Bunny. Good night, Lucy. Good night, Snoopy. Good night, Winkle. Good night, Chauncey. Good night, Bully. I guess everyone is going to sleep. Mrs. Bunny, you'll have to think of an adventure a different day. See you all tomorrow, when it's Friday, Talent Day. I can't wait. And And that is the end of chapter 11. Don't forget to come back for chapter 12, and that will be on Friday, Talent Day. Chapter 12, another talent show. Everybody, wake up, wake up. Lucy was so excited. It's Friday, it's Friday. Time to get up. We are going to have our talent show. Oh boy, how fun. The sun is up, the sky is blue. I'm too tired, said Winkle. I'm too tired, said Snoopy. Can't we have the show later, like in the afternoon? We're way too tired, said Jimmy Z and Little Sprout. Get up, everyone, said Mrs. Bunny. She knew everyone would be excited just like Lucy after they finally got up. Come on! It's breakfast time. We have cherries. Yum, yum. Mostly everyone got up with Mrs. Bunny's encouragement and the promise of cherries. However, Sandy, a very good friend of Lily, was still tired. Mrs. Bunny made a funny breakfast face, and Sandy finally got up. As everyone knew, Lucy was the first contestant, and she had been practicing all week. She twirled her baton and threw it up in the air and caught it without a hitch. Wow! Lucy! Next, beautiful Nicolette played her flute. She doesn't play it very often, so it is always a treat to hear her play. Her mom wasn't able to make it this time, but promised she would come next Friday for sure. Nicolette was a little bit sad, but played well anyway. The next contestant was Snoopy, who was often seen sewing. She displayed an awesome quilt she had been finishing up over the last week. Snoopy, it's so beautiful. Everyone thought it was gorgeous. Next, Frankie the Squirrel did a tightrope performance. It was really stressful to watch, and a lot of the folks held their breath for the entire act. They didn't want him to fall. He didn't fall, he's an expert. Guinevere, Nicolette's young cousin, did another flower arrangement. How pretty! She was glad she got to participate because summer would soon be over and she would be going home. Uli sang a little song. She was a real believer in angels, and so the song she sang was another angel song. She believed in the concept of angels and that they were everywhere.
I saw an angel today, almost missed it as she turned away. Angel, I've not seen you in a long while. Angel, I know your smile. Angel, angel, I've missed you. Angel, angel dear, I will not promise always to believe. Angel, I feel you here. How many years I believed, so many more passed since then. Angel, I thought I would never see you again. Angel,
The next entry was Charlie. He was doing something a little different. It was reciting a poem from the play Macbeth. Double, double, toil and trouble, fire burn and cauldron bubble. Chauncey and Wendy, they were best friends, sang a duet from the album Ponytails. It was called All the Pretty Horses, and it was different from the song everybody knew, so they were surprised. Good job, guys.
Hushaby, don't you cry. Soon we'll see the pretty horses, black and gray, dapple and bay, all your favorite pretty horses.
There's Annie and Danny and Beauregard too. I love to ride them. What about you? Charger and Junior, and don't forget Tuck.
it was lunchtime and time for a nap. Mrs. Bunny said, "See you next Friday, everyone." And that is the end of chapter 12. Come back for more of the story, chapter 13. Chapter 13. Mrs. Bunny goes to the woods, or at least tries to. Mrs. Bunny had been trying to think of an adventure. She remembered hearing that somewhere in Colorville there was a haunted forest. She thought if she tried really hard, she might be able to find it. Off she ran. No one really wanted her to go. Nicolette said there's probably gargoyles there, giants and ogres too. What if you get lost? Mrs. Bunny pooh-poohed their concerns. Have you guys ever seen how fast I can run? I'll run away if I have to. I'll miss you, Mom, said Charlie, very sadly. Who will make me breakfast? Who will sing me to sleep? Snoopy, one of Colorville's oldest residents, took on the care of Charlie. Mrs. Bunny started to look for a magic doorway that would lead to the haunted forest. No, doesn't look right this way. This looks like it leads to music camp. That will have to be another day, another adventure. Maybe it's beyond this fence. If I could just jump over and see, she thought to herself. Though she climbed into a flower pot, she still couldn't see what was over there, and she was not high enough to jump over the top. Oh dear, Mrs. Bunny, what will you do now? Maybe it's behind all this. She found a hole, but didn't think it led anywhere. Mrs. Bunny had to stop for a quick snack. Then she remembered the giant oracle. I wonder if she will help me. She doubted it. The last time she helped, but it was because Charlie was so sick. Mrs. Bunny couldn't find the same oracle. This one that she found was very old, about 1023. Like most elderly people, even giants, she was quite wise and had so much experience, Mrs. Bunny really respected her, as should you all. First, she had to eat a peanut butter and magical gumdrop open-faced sandwich. And then she was going to have to hike to an ancient juniper tree who had a wood sprite always around. They were best friends. She had to not get close to the wood sprite because she was so protective. She would hear, by listening very carefully, the next step in her journey. She had to find and pass a fence covered with red and pink flowers. Oh boy, was she ever tired and hungry. Next, Mrs. Bunny had to pass a meadow full of mountain lupin. She was so tired she had to lay down for a very quick nap. Then on she went. Finally, she got to the wall that was actually the doorway to the realm of enchantment, full of whimsical creatures and lovely trees that had souls. She could not go in today because only on odd days it would open. She scampered home, lickety-split, and memorized how to get there because tomorrow was an odd day. She had a delicious supper, fed Charlie, sang him to sleep with his very favorite song, then went to bed herself. Good night, Mrs. Bunny. Good night, Charlie. Chapter 14. The Enchanted Forest. Mrs. Bunny got tired of so many people telling her that the enchanted forest was actually a haunted forest. They were worried about her being abducted or eaten or turned into a toad. She finally agreed to go on horseback. The palomino she chose to ride was named Blue. It turned out that Blue was way too big, so instead she chose a pony named Bob. Bob was slow, steady, and mellow, and would take good care of Mrs. Bunny. They were both quite excited about going to the enchanted forest. Mrs. Bunny packed a big bag of carrots for them to share. Once the two travelers went through the doorway, they entered a whole different realm. It was magical and surreal. A pristine, verdant, primordial forest opened up in front of them. Wow! They heard lovely singing, and it made the experience even more thrilling. Walking along, it felt as though they were on another planet. The air was moist and cool and smelled like the color green.
I hear notes inside of me. If you want to, you'll hear too. You must listen with your heart and must be quiet for this to start. I can't show you, but if you believe, you will see that this is true. There is a symphony inside each one of us. I promise you that if you open your heart, you'll hear this sweet music start. I hear a symphony inside, and when you hear this music too, then you will know that it's true. It's true, the soul can sing too. I hear notes so sweet it hurts. If you want to, you can too. You must listen with your heart. All must be silent, and this will start. Come walk with me, feel the gentle breeze, hear the rustling of the tree. There is a symphony inside, and I know you will feel it too. And when you open your heart, you'll feel your soul's music start. I hear a symphony inside, and when you hear this music too, then you will know that it's true. It's true, the soul can sing too.
Bunny felt enchanted by the lovely words, and she knew them to be so. Then she and her faithful equine friend came to a tree that looked like a little habitation, just like On My Side of the Mountain, which was one of Charlie's favorite books. Suddenly, out of the tree popped a funny-looking character called a gargoyle. She had been the one singing. Mrs. Bunny complimented her singing and introduced herself. The gargoyle said her name was Margie. Margie introduced them to Lilith, who was Margie's best friend, and she was a puppy pig. Mrs. Bunny thought this was splendid and invited them both to come visit in Colorville, especially on a Friday, so they could watch the talent display and could even join in on the fun. They asked if their friend Grendel could come too. He was kind of terrifying as he was 10 feet tall. They assured Mrs. Bunny that he was actually very nice and his singing voice was a low baritone. Mrs. Bunny said sure. The three funny characters led them further into the forest and invited them to lunch. Oh my! They were having red peppers and lilacs. Yum, yum. I guess it was everyone's favorite because it sure didn't last long. Mrs. Bunny had to take a little nap. Then she decided to go home and return a different day. Everyone was super happy to see Mrs. Bunny, especially the ones that thought she was going to be eaten or thrown in a dungeon. We love you, Mrs. Bunny. I love you guys too. And now it's time for bed. Good night, everyone. Chapter 15. Mrs. Bunny takes Charlie to the enchanted forest. In Colorville, there was a special tree. They all called it the Holy Tree. Charlie was still young and kind of ignorant. He said to Mrs. Bunny, "What's so special about it?" She realized that she had to take him with her to the enchanted forest and teach him about the sacredness of all life. Charlie was excited and didn't care what the reason was. They were going to the enchanted forest. "This is very important, Charlie," Mrs. Bunny said. "You need to be very quiet and feel the life around you." "Okay, Mom," Charlie replied. He didn't really understand, but he agreed to be quiet and try to learn the things she taught him. When they got to the sacred juniper tree, he thought, "Okay, another tree." But he didn't say anything. He knew what she was talking about was very important to her. "Could we meet the lady of the tree?" Mrs. Bunny decided that would be okay. The wood sprite that loved and protected the sacred juniper was over 500 years old. She had seen the ancient tree through many tribulations, including a group of Dwighters that wanted to cut it down and build a house. The lady of the tree was very, very shy. She hid her face, and her language was a lost tongue spoken by an ancient, venerable civilization. She showed them her bracelet, which they understood somehow symbolized the connection between all life. Right after the two travelers went through the gate, they encountered Mr. Tree Man. He had not been there the previous time that Mrs. Bunny had come to the forest. "Who goes there?" Mr. Tree Man said in a low, moaning voice. "Ooh." Mrs. Bunny answered respectfully, "Mrs. Bunny and Charlie, my son." "I'm trying to teach my son about the sanctity of all life." "Okay." he answered in a deep voice like it was coming from the bottom of a well. The two went on and encountered a dense wall of green foliage. "Charlie," she said, "I'm going to recite a poem that Nicolette's mom said to me. It's called A Walk in the Woods." I walk in the woods for healing my soul, to nourish my spirit and help make me whole. The colors are vibrant, so vivid and green. The air, slightly chilled, feels brand new, wetly clean. Though I walk by myself, there's a grand presence here, not quite of this world, yet so tangible, near. A deep sense of quiet feels holy, so right. Mottled sunshine breaks through, leaves filter the light. I'm uplifted, enlightened, but also feel small, a mere speck of sand, overwhelmed by it all. Bowing my head, I'm enveloped with grace, infused, benedicted, blessed by this place. My walk in the woods indeed heals my soul, my spirit renewed. At last I am whole. Ever the joker, Charlie's response, A Walk in the Woods revisited. "Oh my God," he says, "there are gun-wielding hicks. And not only that, but those minuscule ticks. They look like a scab until magnifying seen. A scarab, a carapace, or small jelly bean. And not only that, the ivy is dripping with sap full of poison. Truly, I'm tripping. 'Tis deadly out there, a jungle no less. Can I find a safe way from this god-awful mess? Should I wear body armor? Do I spray deep lore? Forgo all exploration, remain spiritually poor? No, I must brave all those frightening events. I can't hike with bazookas or steel-threaded tents. I'll go forth into nature and brave all those things. And thank God fervently that ticks don't have wings." "Charlie!" Mrs. Bunny was exasperated. "Well, Nicolette's mom taught me that one to me," he said innocently. "Okay, we'll do this another day," she answered in a resigned voice. So they went home and ate chocolate chips and bananas. Yum, yum. And that is the end of chapter 15. Please come back for chapter 16. Chapter 16. Mrs. Bunny tries to take Lucy to the Valley of Angels. One day, Mrs. Bunny was talking to Lucy. Mrs. Bunny had heard of a place in Colorville she had never seen. It was mountainous and cold and had snow year-round. She tried not to pay that much attention to rumors. But this one sounded fascinating. Some called it the Valley of Angels, and Mrs. Bunny was quite intrigued. She didn't remember ever seeing snow before and couldn't quite grasp or imagine a cold substance that looked kind of like sugar. Lucy didn't really want to go and didn't provide a reason. So Mrs. Bunny went to explore this fabled place and see for herself. First she had to climb a very big jacaranda tree. The magic portal into another dimension was near the top. "Oh my," said Mrs. Bunny to herself. She tried not to look down, but fairly quickly she found the doorway and went through it. Wow! She was really surprised. She heard a whispery voice. Cannot pass through, it's 1 for 1. Cannot pass through, your time's not done. My time for what? She wondered. I just want to see what it's like over there. The voice whispered. A visit okay, my angel friend, but you must leave before day end. When Mrs. Bunny went through the portal, right away she saw a beautiful, stately woman. The woman said in a melodious voice, I'm Lady Chalito. I'm here to show you around and answer questions you may have. That's great, said Mrs. Bunny. I heard a voice saying, you cannot pass through. It's 1 for 1. Oh, that, said Lady Chalito. An angel leaves to another dimension to help someone in need, but only when an angel comes back from a mission. What? Mrs. Bunny was very confused. Well, there are many, many dimensions, and some have portals to others. Some are one-way portals and others are both ways, but often with certain rules to travel. This is a two-way door, but in most cases, you have to have 2 going through at the same time. Colorville is unusual in that it has hundreds or even millions of doorways. It's kind of a hub. So I was an angel and came from here, asked Mrs. Bunny. Yes, and your mission isn't completed, said Lady Chalito. My mission is to help the residents of Colorville, Mrs. Bunny said with a burst of understanding. The sage went on. This dimension has no meaning for time. It's hard to grasp. What are those faces in the snow? They are the 2 last angels that came and went at the same time. Since there is no time, it could be either way, one coming, the other going. Is there food here? Mrs. Bunny asked. Yes, of course, said Lady Chalito. Let's go to Crystal White House for lunch. Apples, yum yum, my favorite, said Mrs. Bunny. They ate in silence except for vigorous munching. Mrs. Bunny said, you probably shouldn't tell me any more information for now. I have to think about all this and try to wrap my mind around it. It sounds metaphysical, and I don't even understand calculus. That's fine, said Lady Chalito. Come again if you want to ask more questions later. On the way back to the portal, Mrs. Bunny saw a youngster run by. Well, that looks like Lucy, she said to herself. No, couldn't be. Although she did remember about no concept of time.
Do you hear your own? She
And that is the end of chapter 16. There's lots more coming up in chapter 17.
One day, Lucy was exploring around the foothills of Colorville. She remembered Mrs. Bunny said there were at least hundreds of doorways in Colorville. She couldn't find anything. She looked everywhere, but she couldn't find anything. She asked Bully, but Bully didn't know either. Bully asked Charlie, and Charlie asked Snoopy. Snoopy didn't know, and she only cared about lunch. There was one in plain sight, but they didn't see it. After lunch, Snoopy helped look for a while, but got tired very quickly. Nicolette didn't know, and Chauncey didn't know either. Wendy said, "We better ask Mrs. Bunny." "Hey, Mrs. Bunny!" Mrs. Bunny was out pruning the bougainvillea. Mrs. Bunny came and said, "I'll help you, Lucy." Winkle thought it was funny. "You should have asked Mrs. Bunny to begin with." Lucy was tired. Let's just look for one a different day. And that is the end of chapter 17. Please come back for more of the adventures of Mrs. Bunny, the Queen of Colorville.
Chapter 18. Nicolette Falls in Love. One day, Nicolette met a young fairy, and he was giant, just like she was. He was quite cute and charmed the socks off of Nicolette. Her heart went pitter-patter, pitter-patter. They hit it off right from the very beginning. His name was Ericmon. He invited her to the prom gala that weekend. She, of course, said yes, and they both dressed up in lovely springtime colors. They found out they liked the same music and books, and they both played instruments. Wow! She Skyped her mom, and her mom was very happy to hear how excited her beautiful daughter was about her first date and first prom. Though her mom couldn't come to be a chaperone, she raised her glass in a toast to them. Then she drank down the pumpkin apple cider and then burped. Nicolette was very excited. When Ericmon came to pick her up on his magical horse, he brought a large and lovely corsage for her to wear. "It's gorgeous," she told him. "Camellias are my very favorite." Before they could leave, Mrs. Bunny took her aside and told her how beautiful she looked. And then Mrs. Bunny had a very serious discussion with Nicolette, so she would know the proper things to do on a date. Snoopy, who was eavesdropping across the room, chimed in, "Yeah, and no kissing." Wooly took pictures and wished the happy couple a really fun time. Winkle said in a low voice, "Try not to fart when you dance." "Silly Winkle." Everybody laughed because Winkle broke the ice. Not the cheese, thankfully. The cute couple had a great time, and they danced to Coldplay and the Shins. They also drank huge quantities of sparkling mango radish punch, which was delicious and quenched their thirst. When they got back to Nicolette's place, Ericmon gave Nicole a little hug, which was friendly and correct. He respected Nicolette so much and didn't want to make her angry or disgruntled in any way. When Nicolette came in, she went to tell Winkle and Snoopy about all the fun she had and how much she liked and respected Ericmon. However, they were both asleep, even though they had tried to stay up. "Don't worry, guys," she whispered. She didn't want to wake them up. "I didn't do any kissing or farting. I did almost pee in my pants though because I drank way too much sparkling mango radish punch. Yum yum." Then Nicolette went and made herself a delectable midnight snack. It was zucchini and little tomatoes drizzled with olive oil. Yum! Soon Nicolette and Ericmon were best friends, and then they were going steady. They knew they had a lot of time and that they were so young. They had all the time in the world. Nicolette was only 87 and Ericmon was 86. They soon were so fond of each other, they fell in love. And that is the end of chapter 18. I wonder what's going to be happening in chapter 19. The only way you can find out is to come back and listen to the story, read along, and you can have a lot of fun. Coming up next will be chapter 19. Chapter 19, Mrs. Bunny decides everyone must exercise. One day, Mrs. Bunny was having a leisure day and was reading a book about health and wellness. The book explained the health benefits of vigorous exercise. She decided that they must all exercise. "Not today," said Winkle. "I'm taking a nap." "That's just it," yelled Mrs. Bunny. "There's way too much laying around and napping in Colorville. Someday we might be invited to participate in the Olympics. We all need to start exercising." Mrs. Bunny knew her lazy crowd would only join in if it was really fun. "What if I get hurt?" asked Tito nervously. He wasn't lazy or sloth-like most of the rest of them were, but he had a severe anxiety problem. He worried all the time and got so nervous his eyes bulged. "Don't worry," said Mrs. Bunny. "We will go slow and start low." There was a lot of muttering under the breath going on, but Mrs. Bunny didn't let it bother her. She knew that her kingdom was a mess with lethargic subjects. Mrs. Bunny texted everyone But after waiting a half hour, no one had shown up. Wow, I'm going to have to go and get everyone. I might even have to bribe them, she thought to herself. She started making the rounds, trying to rouse everyone up from their torpor. Come on, Lucy, you will like this. It will be really fun, and it's mandatory. Oh, I'm sorry, said Lucy. I thought you were just kidding, like the time you said you wanted to eat a horse. I've never exercised before and I don't know how to. Exactly, Mrs. Bunny answered. I am going to teach you. And to show you how to do the exercises, and we will all learn together. I found a lot of fitness information on the World Wide Web. I hate spiders, thought Lucy to herself, but she didn't say it out loud. She could tell Mrs. Bunny was in one of her bossy moods. Next, she went to get Bijou, the cute little French guy that liked to hang out with Bully. I can't exercise, said Bijou. I just had my hair styled, and if I get all sweaty, it will frizz out really bad. Also, I made an appointment to get a mani-pedi today. If he isn't going, I'm not either, said Bully, but in a resigned way. She knew how Mrs. Bunny wouldn't stop pestering them until they gave in. You both are joining in. It's mandatory, said Mrs. Bunny. Once they were all gathered, Mrs. Bunny went to the front and said, okay, everybody, stretch, stretch, stretch. They all joined in, and hey, this isn't too bad at all. They stretched and stretched. Next, we are going to run around the entire field, said Mrs. Bunny, and she took off. There were some grumblings. However, they all followed her at a much slower pace. Keep up, she called out. Next, they did some twirling and arm exercises. Hey, this is pretty fun, said Lily. Feels a lot like my dance class. I love to twirl. Don't keep it up if you start to get dizzy, warned Mrs. Bunny, ever concerned with their safety. Pick up the pace, Lucy. You need to get your heart pumping, your blood flowing, and your nervous system buzzing. That sounds really frightening, Lucy thought to herself. Charlie, Mrs. Bunny yelled, no lollygagging. I'm not, he muttered. I dropped my contact. Good try, Buster. You don't wear contacts, she answered. Next, we are going to do downward dog. I know this one, yelled Lucy happily. I learned it in my yoga class last year. Lucy was so good at it, Mrs. Bunny had her model for the whole class. Next, we are going to do jumping jacks. Ready, go. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1. Wow. Woo, said Mrs. Bunny. They were all panting and sweating. Okay, gang, that's enough for today. We are going to have this class the first Monday of every month. Now it's time for lunch. They had the best lunch of all time, and it was healthy too. And that is the end of this chapter, and please come back for the next chapter. One day, a large, lovely giant
came to Colorville. Her name was Therese, and her cute companion was named Ricky. She came once a year to teach jewelry artistry to little girls, and Lily was so excited. Snoopy and Winkle didn't know because they were sleeping. Therese said, "I brought all the supplies." Her son, Adam Sunsky, drew the designs for the talented artist because he's an engineer. Snoopy and Winkle woke up and protested, "We want to do jewelry." Therese showed them how to make a ring. Lucy was a little sad because she didn't have hands, but at least she got to watch. When the day was almost over, Therese said, "I'll paint the sky." It was beautiful, and Mrs. Bunny wanted to do something for her in return. Mrs. Bunny thought about it and decided to consult the oracle. The oracle gave Mrs. Bunny a token that would help her in making something great. Oh my! Mrs. Bunny said, "Wow!" As the fun day ended, a friend of Mrs. Bunny, Beth Lisa, said, "Next year my daughter can participate." It was a great day, and Colorville sent some striking lights as a present to say thanks. And that is the end of chapter 20. Please come back for chapter 21.
Chapter 21. A famous singer comes to Colorville. Wake up, everyone! Rise and shine, sleepyheads! We have a rare treat today. A famous singer is coming. Come on, everyone! This singer is widely known across many realms. Her name is Buster, and she mostly only performs for her own principality. However, she agreed to sing for us. I told her that later this summer we are all going to music camp. She loves to encourage and help youngsters that want to learn how to sing or play an instrument. She was impressed that I was planning to take so many of you to music camp. Soon everyone, even sleepyhead Charlie, got up, ate some quick breakfast, and then gathered together in Coloratorium, which was Colorville's largest auditorium. They were so excited but tried to be quiet. They whispered with each other in anticipation.
This little girl inside of us is crying for her belief in fairy tales is dying. We want to hold on to our knees like the prince in white. We want to keep our hopes alive, keep our dreams inside. This fairy tale, it has no happy ending. A princess died, and her death is now sending a message to the little girls who still want to dream that there are no princes left, they're gone to it seems. So princess, goodbye, princess. My faith in fairy tales has died today. So princess, goodbye, princess. Here's cry for all that died with you today. A princess died, and the whole world is crying, for she believed, and that belief is dying. You know Snow White, she died today, Cinderella too. I wish that I could still believe, but the dream died too. So princess, goodbye, princess. My faith in fairy tales has died today. So princess, goodbye, princess. Here's cry for all that died with you
Wow, she brought down the house. Encore, encore. Flowers rained down on Buster. Everyone was very excited about going to band camp. And that is the end of chapter 21. Come back soon to watch chapter 22 of Queen Mrs. Bunny and all her funny friends. Chapter 22. Mrs. Bunny returns to the Valley of the Angels. As mentioned in a previous chapter, Mrs. Bunny read about a wide variety of subjects. Ever since she had gone to the Valley of the Angels, she had been reading and thinking about what she heard there. Stephen Hawkins was her favorite. Mrs. Bunny thought of asking Nicolette if she would like to come with her. Maybe she would understand all that scientific mumbo-jumbo gobbledygook. But Mrs. Bunny saw that Nicolette was trying to bond with Blue, a skittish and shy horse. She decided not to bother them. Mrs. Mrs. Bunny decided to go by herself. She was looking forward to seeing Lady Cholito again, asking her questions and listening to her wisdom. Mrs. Bunny set off for the jacaranda tree so she could enter the Valley of the Angels again. Her knuckles became very white as she gripped the branches. Soon she passed through the doorway, and this time there wasn't any whispery voice telling her what to do. Probably because it recognizes me, she thought to herself. She looked around, even behind some trees, but she didn't see Lady Cholito anywhere. Now what am I going to do? I really want to learn about the time-space paradox. Mrs. Bunny saw some footprints, so she followed them. Maybe Lady Cholito is eating lunch. I hope so, she thought. She followed them for a while. During her tramp through the snow, she tried to list the facts that were hard to grasp. How can there be a place that has no time? Stephen Hawking says all kinds of weird stuff that I can't understand. I should have brought some of my books. When Mrs. Bunny got to the lunchroom, she looked all around, and Lady Cholito was not there. Mrs. Bunny suddenly recognized a lady on the other side of the room. Why, you're Nicolette's mom, aren't you? Yes, my name is Raylania. Mrs. Bunny said, I thought you had to stay close to the ocean so you wouldn't age. Raylania answered, There's no time here, so I can stay to visit as much as I want. Or at least the forward and backward time events even out, so it seems like there is no time. I'm not really sure how it works. You'll have to ask Lady Cholito, but she's not here today. But there's her shadow self over there. What? Mrs. Bunny squeaked. This is all really hard. Raylania answered, Lady Cholito and two of her friends went to Orchestrion to perform in a concert. They left their shadow selves as a kind of placeholder. I wish you had brought Nicolette. I miss her. I'll try to bring her next time, Mrs. Bunny said. Better yet, you should all come to Oceania. It's really beautiful. You have to swim through an underwater cavern, so it isn't that easy to get to. I'm the protector of all sea life there. I can help you guys swim through the caves. Suddenly, they came to a big pile of snow. Oh my, said Mrs. Bunny. Is that Lucy? No, not really. Things are different here, and because there is no time, people can sometimes be seen, but it might be that they came earlier, or else they will come at some point. Oh no, Mrs. Bunny thought to herself. I need to read those Neil deGrasse Tyson books I got from the library. It started to snow, and how beautiful it was. Bunny went back through the doorway. She scampered home as fast as she could. Boy, was she starving. Well, she said to herself, what did I learn today? And then said out loud, nothing. A big, fat nothing. Back to the books. Hey, yum yum, what's that yummy smell? It was mangoes and bananas drizzled with chocolate that Snoopy had made for Charlie. It's supper time, and there's enough for everyone. Woo! What a tiring day. Life is so wonderful, she said out loud, and everybody agreed. And that is the end of a very busy day, and it's also the end of chapter 22. Please come back and you'll see chapter 23. You can listen, read along, and see about all the fun things that are bound to happen in Colorville.